Well, this is going to be a lot different today than some. I'm going to invite Heidi to come up and be with me. We're going to do this sort of on an interview basis. She has spent 17 years, go ahead and be seated. I'll politely wait till you're down.
Oh, thank you.
She spent 17 years serving in the Central African Republic and has represented us really well there, and we're so thrilled. Why don't you just overview a little bit of your time, what your responsibilities were, and just some of the general kinds of things.
The general kind of things. I was a guest house manager, so I oversaw the guest house, and I helped to coordinate the teams. And we would have teams that would come from Europe and from here in the States. And sometimes we'd average about 25 teams a year. So if you did the math, sometimes that was 2 teams a month. And I tried to convince the mission we had to have a week in between teams, because the way the flight schedule was, the flight would arrive in the morning and it would leave that night. So if I already had 10 people there and then 10 more people arrived, but the other 10 didn't leave until that night, that could get very interesting. So my rule was, if you slept in the bed last night, you're out, and the bed goes to the person who was on a plane all night. So I coordinated the teams, and that's from taking care of anything from their laundry to their food to I need sunscreen. What do I do about this? Can you translate for that? And I worked in the office, and working in the office would mean going to the bank to get money, doing accounting, sending emails, doing whatever needed to be done. And I also had the opportunity to teach English. I worked in our seminary teaching our future pastors. I taught police officials out at the Bangui airport. I taught Lebanese little boys who were about 9 years old. I tutored them in English. So lots of different opportunities to teach English.
Some of the interesting things to me, they're probably just minute detail, but if I understand correctly, in Bangui, the flights only came in and out on Wednesday?
Well, it depended on the time of the year, but sometimes it was Wednesday. One time for about a couple years, it was on Sunday, which the time I would get to the airport and get a team picked up and bring them back, I would miss church. So yeah, it changes. But yeah, one flight a week.
A little bit different than our airports, and it was, and another thing that she did mention, but teaching English to the officers, security, and people at the airport, that just gave you incredible inroads, and also probably helped some of the people going in and out, because she was known and trusted by everybody there too.
I became their teacher, which put me on a different level. In fact, Dave Giles, he said one time he went through the airport, he had his passport checked about 16 times. And then after that, when I started teaching English there, I took him through, and he said to me, whatever you do, don't quit teaching English here. And when I would arrive, I would get off the plane, they would take my luggage, they would take me right through, everyone would stop their work, oh, Mademoiselle's back, and they would have to greet me, and everyone's looking at me like, who are you? Oh, I just teach them English, you know.
Still asking, who are you? But anyhow, yeah. Give us an overview of 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the ministries that we as Fellowship of Grace Brethren Churches had at that time in the Central African Republic, like the seminary, some of the medical stuff, and teaching.
Yeah, we have one seminary, which had been based up at Bata and recently had been moved down to Bangui. We have 4 Bible schools. We have 2 hospitals, 10 clinics. We had an orphan care program, a program that worked with widows. And, you know, if you look back in the history, we've been working in the country since 1920. And in the prime, we had like over 80 missionaries. And now there was 6 of us. And so quite a few years ago, lots of things had been handed over to the Central Africans, which is a good thing in some ways. They don't always do things the way we would do it, but that's okay. They do things that work for their culture. And it's a good thing because now they're able to keep a lot of that stuff going. And so our role really changed. We were there to help them and to assist them, you know, with communication with the States. And even now, that has really opened up with Skype and Facebook, and a lot of our pastors are on. I get messages from them on Facebook, and, you know, it's very interesting typing in Sango. At least we use the same letters, but I always have to switch my thinking. Oh, wait a minute, Sango now, okay.
It's kind of fascinating to me that they even have that ability to do the technology and stuff there. And so
Well, with cell phones,
yeah,
they can do that now.
yeah. I can remember when Joel Moyne was over in Africa, more probably about almost 2 decades ago, more than 2 decades ago, and there was a little bit of mix-up on some of his financial support. I think it was being used in the wrong fund or something. And we were communicating back and forth via ham radio. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget the day that Ed Lewis, who at that time was on staff at the Encompass, was so excited when he called me and said, "Bud, the Central African Republic got a phone." And it's like, really? That was pretty exciting. And it really was. It was like the first phone in the country was our mission owned it. And mm-hmm. Now they all got cell phones and things like that. Tell us about the churches in the Central African Republic.
Well, we have more Grace Brethren churches in the Central African Republic than we do here in the States. We have over 2,000 Grace Brethren churches just in CAR. We have 60 of those in Bangui. When most people walk, so they're close to where people live. And, I went around and I visited a lot of different churches until I found one that I felt I wanted to be involved in. And of course, they felt like I should just go to a different church every Sunday, which would have taken me a couple of years, to get to everybody. But I didn't want that. I really wanted to be able to go to the same church where I could get to know people. And a lot of times, to show respect, they would put me on the front. They'd put me up front in a chair. And I didn't like that, because then everybody's looking at me instead of paying attention to what the pastor's saying. And when I first went into the Kasai Grace Brethren Church, they let me sit with the women. And I remember thinking, okay, this is good where I need to be, because they let me be part of them, And so then I became a part of that church, was a part of their women's group. And that was really good when I was first learning Sango to go in. It was real scary, because when you're learning another language and you're around people you don't know, sometimes it's harder to understand what they're saying. But I would just go and started developing relationship with these women. And they were proud that the missionary went to their, it's like gave them a status. We'd go to district meetings. She goes to our church. So.
They only knew, right? Yeah. You mentioned over 2,000 churches in the Central African Republic. Those who are around here often enough heard me say it's a Dave Giles thing that I forget which one's which. 90% of the churches, Grace Brethren churches that met today on Sunday, some of them are already way ahead of us time schedule-wise, some are yet to come, but 90% of those churches that are Grace Brethren that meet today met outside of the continental United States, mm-hmm. and 95% of the church services, worship services, were in languages other than English. So what were like just big numbers of the whole grouping in Africa? What kind of attendances are we talking about? 60 churches, are we getting like 1,000 people?
Well, our biggest church was the Castor Grace Brethren Church, and they would average like 4,000 in their service. The church that I attended was actually the second church that was planted in Bangui, and we used to average up to about 400 or 500, but in the Second Civil War, a lot of the people that lived in that area moved away. So we were down to maybe about 200. And so they do a French service first, and then they do a Sango service. So the French service tended to be not as many people, and the Sango service, a lot more people attended.
So today in the Central African Republic, that's all over because they're like 6 hours or whatever, 5 or 6
hours.
5 hours ahead of us. So it's almost supper time there. I'm getting hungry. But what was it like for them today? Because some of them really are in danger. And
it just really depends on the part of the town they're at, whether or not they could even meet. One of our churches has been burnt out by local Muslims. And a lot of our people are not living in the areas where they used to live. They're in refugee camps. Thousands of them are still living out at the airport. And what's really encouraging is some of our evangelists have gone out to the airport and have started little churches out there among believers. So, they're taking, this is not a good situation, but they've got all these people together, so they're going out and saying, okay, we're going to get together, we're going to have church here. So, that's encouraging to know that they're doing that.
And that's something that we never experienced here in our little world. You have rebels coming through. They're trying to kill and disrupt and destroy things. And people fled their homes and their areas. And in Bangui, I don't know what it's like today, but at one time there was upwards of 40,000 people who decided to make the airport their home. Mm-hmm. They camped out there. And I saw pictures that I think Doug took when they were flying into Bangui one time, landing, and just the mass of people. It's just unbelievable. And some of it, as Heidi said, some of our really inspired evangelists and pastors types have went there and have made that a mission in itself. So.
Well, and Dr. Ibaile has done some training in trauma. And so he has brought some people together and taught them how to go out and bring people together and just help them to work through all this stuff that they've seen. Because they're not just killing each other with machine guns, they're doing it with machetes, and people are seeing this, and it's affecting, families are running away and they're going in different directions, and then they're, taking a while to get back together. And it's just.
What about out in the bush area? Because you hear every once in a while that it's settled down in Bangui, but then you hear reports that, it's still really bad in this area and that area.
Yeah, Bambari, which is where Pastor Boy Andre's home village is, that's kind of the rebel soldiers, which are called Seleka. They've kind of declared that as their area. And what they're wanting to do is literally split the country and make it Muslim on this side and Christian on another side. And we really don't want to see that happen. And so that area, it's just, they've had problems on and off. Pastor Boy Andre and his family are now all in Bangui. But it took a while for him to get his family there, because it was, for a while there, it wasn't safe for them to be traveling on the road. And but they are all safe and sound in Bangui, and it just depends. I mean, Bangui is fine for a while, and then they might have problems out at Killamit Sank or some other areas. I get Google reports. And there are some days I just delete them. I just can't even read them. And then there's other days, I read them, and I think, okay. Because I've been in Bangui reading Google reports going, really? Seriously? I don't think so. And I'm calling people, the internet's saying this. Is this really what happened? And they're going, well, no, it's more like this, So I've been on the other side, so I definitely read those with a grain of salt.
But it's on the internet, it's true.
Oh, right.
Boy Andre was at one point was in Bangui. His family was back home, and he was separated for a long time from them. I remember him communicating that he was hearing from his family, but it was at one point it was through someone in the Red Cross was giving messages back and forth. So I mean, this is a world that we don't understand, and it's incredible that that's even going on. So has Grace Brethren churches, or even other churches, there's other great ministries there too, not just us. Have some of them out and around, like you mentioned about being burned out, are they seeing destruction to churches? Are Christians being killed?
Yeah, we are hearing reports. The Baptist Mission, I've got good friends that work with them. They've got 2 missionary families that are back, both older families without kids. And, SIL, they have lost a lot of their translators, have been killed. Here these men have finally gotten educated, and they're finally working on translating the Bible into their tribal language. And then, these men are killed, and it's like you got to start all over again, because you can't just go in and translate the Bible. You have to be trained on how that works, because they use computer programs. It's actually friends that do that. I don't get it, but it's very interesting how they talk about how that's done. And they have lost many, many people. A big thing in the news is Ebola, and that has not hit the CAR. It's further west than where we live, and there are some cases down south in Congo. But if they don't get that stopped, that could just spread and that would be really bad.
Congo is straight south, and it's just right down the river, so that's
right across the river.
Yeah, it can just really travel quickly, so that can be really bad. In your bulletin today and on the screen for the mission prayer thing for the week, mentioned that recently there were 15, I believe, graduates from the seminary. They're going to be going out and serving internships at different churches. We're still producing, and the plan is in October to start up the next school year for that. So what other good things are happening with our ministries, like the orphanages? What's still functioning?
Well, our hand-in-hand schools, a lot of them are continuing on. Project Hope and Charity in Bangui, they're just really trying to figure out what that's going to look like in the future. They had over, 2,000 orphans that were coming to the schools. We had 2 different schools. We just could not, to get them all to one place, we kind of divide them up and had one school on one side of town and one on the other. But a lot of them are living other places, and they're not able to come into the school. And just so you know, it's very normal for school to start in October. That's the normal start date. So it hasn't been delayed. They actually were delayed and just finished up the school year for the seminary. Many of you know we're going to start a doctorate program. We used to bring Central Africans to Grace Seminary to do their doctorate, but if you can imagine bringing a family here to the States, that's very expensive. And actually, so they're starting a doctorate program, and it's an extension of Grace Seminary in Bangui, but they're actually going to have those candidates go to Cameroon to do the courses because it's a more controlled environment. Although Cameroon has the president who is he's sick and could die, and when he dies, it'll be interesting to see what happens in that country.
Just to let you know, when I was in seminary, I think Dr. Pierre was, Yaguda was
Dr.
there.
Yaguda.
And, these poor African people, this guy is so brilliant. It's amazing they let us sit in the same classes together. He could do all that doctorate stuff in several languages. It's just amazing, some of the people. So now, with your crystal ball, the future for the Central African Republic and our ministries there are really totally questionable. There's a little, and so you can address that, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit about what's happening in Cameroon.
Yeah, ministry is changing, and we're not sure how this all civil war is going to play out. They put in a new prime minister who's Muslim, thinking maybe that's going to help calm the water. I don't know if it is or not. I don't have that crystal ball to look into. And so, does that mean our people are going to be based in Cameroon more and then maybe make trips in and out? Frank Poole and Ginger Hawk are hoping to go to Bangui in October to sit down with the leaders of our churches there and to make some of these hard decisions. How do you keep funding guards and electricity? I mean, we pay $400 a month for our internet, which we need in order to stay in communication with the people there. But before, what they would do is figure out what it would cost for a year to run the mission, and they divide it by the missionaries. And I'm fortunate I was single. I only paid in for one person. Couples would pay in twice. And so they had that money in order to run the mission. Now, with those missionaries not there, you can't expect them to help pay for things in Bangui when they're living in Cameroon. So, how are we going to keep guards paid and electricity and water and internet and da-da-da-da-da-da-da? I mean, our vehicles, we haven't used our vehicles. They are up on blocks because we're still at a point where if we take our vehicles out, there's a possibility they could be taken. So, there's a lot of, we need to really be praying for Frank and for Ginger. I'm so glad I'm not in their position and have to make these decisions because these are hard decisions to make. And I don't even think they know what's going to happen. They just need to sit down with Pastor Najilau, who's the head of our church association there, and try to work out how are we going to do this. So, and a lot of it's just going to depend on how this whole Civil War thing ends up. And if we can get a government in, right now, the interim president is a female. And so hopefully maybe she's going to get it going right. Who knows?
That was an interesting selection when she was selected, because in that patriarchal community, that was a little bit
That's
unique.
The first one. She used to be the mayor of Bangui, so.
Mm-hmm. Good. And she's good. That's good.
We hope.
We hope, yeah. Sometimes we look at scriptures and we look at passages like where Paul and Barnabas had a falling out with each other because of John Mark and all that. And And we see, from the big picture thing, we see God's hand in that it formed two ministry teams. So it's real easy for us, ignorant or arrogant or both Americans, to look at something like this and say, well, God's got a master plan, and so there's going to be some things. Maybe it has to do with the Africans being way more in control of everything. I mean, there's just lots of reasons, and we'll never know all the reasons, but they still are going through horrible, horrible stuff. And so, they still need our prayers a lot. We've kind of moved staff mostly. Most of the staff has moved to the Cameroon. Can you tell us a little bit of what that means and what they're doing?
Yeah, Janet Varner is in Cameroon living with Karen Foster. They're sharing the same house. She's kind of overseeing the finances. Dr. Ibaile's wife, Madame Ibaile, is doing the actual finances on the ground. But then she's communicating with Janet via Skype and phone calls. And Janet has to send a letter to the bank to release money so they could go get the money. And so she's doing a lot of that. She's also going and working with women in teaching in their women's program. And then Doug and Jackie, they're working. He has done a class. In fact, he was down in Douala doing a class. And he's going to be working with Jason, Carmine, who they're brand new out there. And they're going to be doing kind of like a Bible school like we do in Chad, where they come in for like a month, and then they learn, and then they go home and let's put it to practice. Let's see how you do with it. And then they come back for another month and do another course, and kind of a block type system. And they're finding that works really well, especially in Chad, because you can go to seminary and act one way, and then you get out, and then it's like, oh my goodness, where did that person come from? But if they're putting it into practice as they're using it, you get to see, okay, what is their life spiritually, and are they really following the Lord, and are they using what they're learning? And so Doug has been able to kind of help get some of that started, and help the translator to know how to work with an American. So they're doing it with a translator. And Pastor Jason, actually he's Dr. Jason, he got his doctorate, which gives him more status in the African culture. So, and then everybody knows Jackie. She has a ministry with whoever she meets and gets together with. And I love her Facebook posts. I read those and just laugh.
Yeah, you have to friend Jackie Jensen on Facebook if you want to be entertained, and all her translation mistakes and all that kind of stuff. Pretty good stuff.
Yep.
So really, tell us the truth. What is it like to be under fire and held up with Doug and Jackie for 6 weeks?
Actually, they're good people to be stuck with, especially Janet. She can cook everything out of anything and make it taste good. I remember the first night when we were being attacked, we had no power, so we were actually sitting out. We had a full moon, and Jackie's like, we're having a picnic by the moonlight. And I was like, that's a good way to look at it, And because we had no electricity, we're cleaning out all the goodies from our freezer. So all the M&Ms are coming out, and we're eating chicken, and, got to eat it before it goes bad, right? So.
Okay, it's not that bad if you have M&Ms.
Yeah.
Yeah, you turn them upside down, and it's WW for Weight Watchers.
Oh, is that how it works?
Yeah. About the Chad, what kind of ministries do we have there? What's going on
Well,
there?
we have several Bible schools in Chad. Some of our Bible schools are taught in their native language, and then we have one that's done in I think it's done in French. And then we don't have a hospital, we have a clinic, and the doctor there can do surgery. Amazing. He's come to Bangui and worked with our medical teams. And I worked in Chad for 3 years when we were evacuated in 2002. So I got to know a lot of the people up there. And they have the Summer School of Evangelism, which is going on right now, where the men come in for about 2 or 3 months, and they're educated, and they're sent back out. And they have to send reports in showing what they're doing. And if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, they don't get invited to the next course. And they have to do this for 5 years, and then they get their Bible degree. And so there's a lot of different things going on. Kurt and Kay Carver are actually in the process of leaving the field after 9 years in Africa. Karina Corrales is actually in Argentina on home ministry. She is originally from Argentina. We have a very international team in Chad. And then we had a lot of Germans. We had more German speakers on our team than we did English speakers. But yet our team language was English because one person couldn't speak French, me. So technically our team language should have been French, but since I couldn't speak French, our language was English. And so right now, Beate, who is German, is the only missionary in Mundu. So really be praying for her. It's tough to be the only missionary there because everybody who needs something goes to that one person. And that gets hard after a while. But we have a new family, the Palmers, who are in language study in France, who are hoping to move to Chad in January. But they're going to be in Jamena. And so there's going to be kind of you can't keep a single person by herself in Mundu. So I think she'll be moving to Jamena too. So there's a lot of changes. The mission all over is changing on how the structure, and I still don't get all of that. But instead of having regional directors, if you work with church planting, you're under this person who's over church planting. And I think the guy is in England, but if you are in Asia church planting, you're under him. But if you're developing the church, then you're under this. So there's like 5 categories. And I remember thinking, I'm just glad I don't have to figure out what category I am. Because I was technically support staff, and I don't know if they really have a category for support staff anymore. So.
And you don't want to cross over and do 2 different things. That'd be really confusing. So it is interesting. We're seeing a lot of change, a lot of some of that's forced upon us. We can't help but have differences because of just what's going on there. Some of our other missions that we have, like in Asia, are very complicated, very difficult ministries. Some of them are in highly concentrated Muslim-controlled areas, which becomes very dangerous for some of them. And so it's just a mixed bag of what's going on for us around the world. But there are great things, and it's nice to say these things out loud because this church, have been very, very faithful and supportive to all the missions and Compass, and I think it's about right around 10% of our budget goes just to Encompass. We send about another 10% to other places as well, and other ministries like Grace Schools and church planning in the U.S. and Canada and things like that. So we give about 22% of our budget goes outside the church. So it's nice to have someone who's hands-on, and really, Heidi, your ministry there has been tremendous, just absolutely tremendous what God has used you in. And so we're very, very grateful as a church for that. I was going to, at this time, I was going to give this wonderful presentation and surprise you, silly, and you were going to cry and all this stuff. And then you said, hey, did Tom Peters give you that thing that's for me? Yeah, he did. So I can still give it to you, but minus the tears and all that. So
Tom Peters was staying in my house. I saw these pictures he posted on Facebook, and I thought, that's my living room. And he was having a meeting, and I said, hey, when you come back, are you coming straight back? And he's like, yeah. And I said, oh, wait, could you bring me a few things? Because, I left for vacation. And so he's like, sure. And this, if I can, it's heavy. Because the other guy couldn't take it because it was so heavy. Friends of mine who live in Alaska had this made for me. And I told them, oh, I'm not taking this to Africa. I don't want to lose it. And they said, no, you need to take it. It's the shape of Africa, and then they put a heart where CAR is. And this was made by a gentleman in their church who was helping to raise money for his sister who was adopting a baby from like Kenya or something. And he even signed the back. And so they gave me this, and I took it to Africa, and I had this on my wall in my dining room. And so many people, they just really, really like this. And I'm like, I don't want to take this to Africa. I don't want to ever lose it. Because, the thing is, whatever you take to Africa stays in Africa. It's really hard to bring stuff back. And they said to me, no, you should take it. Because if someone breaks in your house, you can use this to knock them over the head with. But he said, don't do it with this edge because you might kill them.
So it really is, supposedly it is a silhouette of the continent of Africa. First time I looked at it, I thought it was a silhouette of Marge Simpson, but but anyhow, it's really nice, very nice.
Yes. So I had
very
asked
special.
Tom Peters if he could bring this back for me. And he said he would. And then he sent me a note, and he said he was going to be out of town. And he says, I'll just give it to Pastor Bud. And somehow when I was talking this morning, I remembered it. And I was like, do you have something for me? So, yeah, I have actually been able to get a few things from my home to bring back. I have a quilt that the Ashland Grace Brethren Church women made for me. And I have that back here, actually in Indiana. And a couple of other things. And, I'm really hoping that maybe next year things are calm, that I can go back, because I still need to figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my household items there, and just be able to see people. And I'm on status as what they call a special assignment missionary, which the really cool thing about that is if opportunities arise, they call me and say, hey, we're going to take this team, or we need this project done, can you go? And so then I would take time off from my full-time job here in the States and would be able to travel back. And so actually support money that you have all provided over the years is still in my fund balance, and I can use that money to help pay for those trips. And so when I communicated to my supporting churches, I said, stop your support right now, as of January. And they're like, well, we'll keep supporting you until you find another job. And I said, no. I said, I have a healthy fund balance, and I feel I need to use what I have first before I ask for any more. I said, but don't worry. When it starts getting low, I'll come knocking on your door and let you know. So.
Well, we're so thankful, Heidi, for all that you've done and for the great representation. I referenced earlier in the Sunday school the book, I think his name was Dr. Castle, that wrote the book called The Road to Bangui. And I mentioned that he had married a young lady that was from Rittman. And so that was first connection. But then when he was there, he worked under Dr. Walker. Mm-hmm. And I used to tell people, and it was way too prideful, but I used to tell people about when we were in Africa, the medical work. And for a while, most of the medical training going on in Africa was through the Grace Brethren missionaries and doctors and nurses, and there was a lot of great things there. And I used to, when I tell some of my Baptist friends about it, I'd say, and we own the Central African Republic. Right now, we're ready to give it back with the way things are right now, but it's been great. So, any last words you want to say?
I am Huber Heights is one of my supporting church, and they put it. I thought they put this the greatest. It's my final tour to go around and just to say thank you for your faithful support over the last 17 years. You guys have been there since day one. I first went to Africa in '93 on Safari of Hope. And I remember the day we arrived, they said, if you write a letter and if we mail it today, your parents may receive it before you get home in 6 weeks. And then I had the opportunity to go back in '94, and I worked with Mike and Myra Taylor and helped homeschool their children. And I remember we had a mail strike. I didn't get mail for like the first 4 months I was in Africa. And then it all arrived, and it was like finally news from home. And then when I started full-time in '96, I helped set up the email program. Email had really just come out at that time, and I had no idea what email was. So I learned what I could, and then I got there. And that's when all the email would come into Bangui. We put it on diskettes to send it up to people. And, when we left, people who lived up country were able to get it over the ham radios through MEF. And so what a change. And to be able, when we Skyped, and I was sitting in the office in Bangui, and people go, you don't look like you're in Bangui. I'm like, I need to do something in my office in Africa so it makes it look more African, I guess. But I just want to thank you for your faithful support, and you'll probably see me around every once in a while since I have connections in this church. And
It's not a farewell tour because we will see her. She was last here, I think, in November at our 100th anniversary celebration.
And then before that was Joe Ellen's graduation.
Yeah. So I mean, she's one of us.
You just never know when I'm going to show up.
Yeah, you're always welcome. Well, let's have a word of prayer together, and then Dave, afterwards, we can finish up if you like with music. Great. Father, we are today just grateful for your work and for the people that you have chosen to do that work. We think of Heidi and many, many others that have worked side by side with her. And our hearts go out to our brothers and our sisters in Bangui and throughout Central African Republic who are facing hardships that we don't even comprehend. And yet their lives are in danger. Their lives are on the line, partially because of just the hardness and sinfulness of mankind, also because they are committed to you as their Savior. And we pray your protection upon them. We pray that they would sense your presence and power in their lives as they worship and serve the living God. Lord, thank you for the ministries here. Help us to begin to understand how very blessed we are. Help us to respond in ways that are overwhelming in our love and our commitment to you as our Savior. Lord, thank you for the fact that there's some here that have served around the world in different capacities and do so still, and that maybe in the future there may be some here in the building today that will also take the call and go to other places to take the gospel where it isn't at. Lord, we just thank you for the great entrustment you have given to us, and what a wonderful, tremendous message of hope and grace that can be shared throughout this world. We give you honor and glory through Jesus Christ. Amen.